right, so the first blade that we're going to start with is going to be an adjustable blade. And what we're going to talk about in this is true for all adjustable blades. What we're going to work on for showing you in this video is going to be the standard three-hole blade from Wahl. So this is going to be on a lot of your designer clippers and a lot of the Wahl adjustables. But it's also going to be the same for the master blade. This is going to be the same for the Arco blade. And any blade that has an adjustment lever that's going to move and not stay in the same position all the time. Almost all of your trimmers, detachable blades, most every other blade is going to be a stationary blade that stays in one position. But what we're going to talk about, this is an exception to the rule. So don't take what we're saying here and apply it to the blades that you're sharpening every single day. This is specifically with a blade that is an adjustable blade. So let's go ahead and we're going to go on over, or first, before we go on over and sharpen, what I was going to talk about here is setting our magnet on the blade. This part is true of all blades in that when we set our magnet on the blade, we want to set it in such a way that our pressure, where we're putting our downward pressure on the blade, is going to be coming over what we call the front rail of the blade. And that's where our pressure needs to be. That gives us the most control, and it helps us to counter the centrifugal force that's coming from the plate spinning underneath us. So I'm going to set this magnet just like this, so that the front of this magnet, where my pressure is going to be, is sitting right in the middle of this front rail right here. I like to sharpen on the combs with the magnet going vertically versus horizontally. And so in that case, I'm going to move the whole magnet forward just a little bit, because this angle right here is not a 90-degree angle, and so my pressure is going to naturally be a little bit further back. So if I had my magnet set back here like I had it when it was going the other way, my pressure is going to be coming down way back here in the back, and that's not where I want the pressure to be. So we're going to move it up a little bit. My only kind of word of warning, if you want, this is more comfortable for me, so I like that, but you can't do that on the cutting blade, the cutter blade. And so we're going to be switching back and forth between each blade. And so because of that, you're going to be switching a little bit of your techniques in your magnet position. So just something to remember if you're just getting started and that kind of thing. This is adding a variable into it. And if we're trying to have consistency, we're going to want to keep that magnet in the same spot every single time. And so when I'm teaching, I like to teach, keep the blade in the same spot. In reality, I don't do that, and you're not going to see me keep it in the same spot on every blade. When we're talking about the cutting blade, I don't have room to put the magnet vertically. It kind of sits hanging off the edges, and I don't want to end up losing the blade on my wheel. So we're going to end up turning it horizontally, and then I pretty much just line the front of this blade up basically with the tips of the teeth. Once we're lined up with the tips of the teeth, we want to make sure that we're centered from side to side, and then we know that our magnet's in the right spot for us to have the pressure in the place that it needs to be. So now we're going to go on over to the sharpening machine, and we're going to talk about sharpening adjustable blades. All right, so we're over here. We're going to start with the comb blade, and on the comb, what I'm going to do, I've got my magnet set up. We're ready to start sharpening. What we're going to do is I'm going to set down in the middle. We're going to do a few passes to wear in a new surface here from the wear that's already here on this blade. And then what we need to do on an adjustable blade, the big piece that we do differently is that we're going to have a flatter ground in the blade. So it's not going to be a true flat ground, but it's going to be a lot closer to a flat ground than a hollow ground. And so what we're going to do that is we're going to sharpen this normally like we would sharpen all blades, 1.5 pounds of pressure. As we're sharpening and grinding away, we're developing a hollow ground into this blade. But then before we pick it up, we're going to come out here to the outside. I'm going to lighten up my pressure and leave it here for a second or two, maybe 3. And what that's doing is that's grinding away the deepest parts, or the high points of that hollow ground. And so it's going to give us a flatter or a shallower hollow ground. And the reason we want to do that on an adjustable blade is because we need the blade to make good contact, both blades to make good contact, both at a short length and at the long length. So when the cutter's riding up here by the tips, or when the cutter's down here back towards the bottom, it still needs to have good contact with the blade. And so that's why we're trying to create the flat ground here. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the technique that I just talked about there and what that looks like in real time. Now I'm lightening up my pressure. Notice how my sparks changed, as well as the sound that was coming out of the wheel changed. I held it there for 3 or 4 seconds, and then a nice clean lift. I like to inspect the surface, making sure that my scratch lines are straight through the blade. We're also going to make sure that we don't have any wear left behind, that we've created a new surface into this plate, or into this blade. So I'm going to come over here to the burnishing block, and we're going to burnish the blade a little bit and see what kind of a pattern we have here. And so what this is showing me, if you can end up catching it there, is all the tips of the teeth are burnished, and it's still pretty high up, which is not exactly what we want in this blade. However, if we were to come over and burnish it again, what we should see is that this burnishing pattern is going to end up going down the blade quite quickly. And you can see we almost doubled in size of our burnished pattern just in one burnishing. And basically what that's telling me is that I have that shallow hollow ground that I was looking for. There would be room to go shallower yet, and that could all be debated. But I think we're going to have really good results with this blade, and that's what we do for the comb blade of any adjustable blade that we sharpen here at the Edge Pro. Alright, so now we're going to move on over to the cutter. And so for the cutter, I'm setting the magnet up just like we talked about earlier. I've got the magnet pretty much on the tips of the teeth, maybe slightly behind it. And I'm going to sharpen this cutter pretty quickly. The reason for that is I've been noticing on these cutters is that, one, they build up heat pretty quick, and then two, they also build up a burr pretty quickly. And so I want to combat both of those things, and so the less time I'm on the plate, the less burr and the less heat we're going to have. And typically the cutters don't have a huge amount of wear on them, and so just in a few quick passes they're already back into a new lapped surface. So here's what that looks like. And that quickly I already have a new surface, and as I'm running my teeth on my fingers on the back side of these teeth, or the top side of the teeth, I can feel that I've already created a burr there. Something I've run into with these blades specifically is sometimes that burr needs a little help being removed to give us the cleanest edge that we can have. So we'll talk more about burr removal a little bit later. And the same process would be used on this blade, but I'm not going to take time here in the adjustable blades to talk about what that burr removal would look like, but we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. But that's all we do here. We can come on over to our rub block. See what kind of a pattern we get here. And typically these small teeth are not going to give us a very clear, distinct pattern. Overall, if we look at that, we can see that my pattern is probably just generally flat. I probably have a little more pressure to use because it's just burnished everywhere. So I'm going to come in here and just increase my pressure just slightly. That's all it takes to change our hollow ground. Now you can see it's more defined all the way up on the tips of the teeth, and it comes down on the edges of the cutter. And that's really what we're looking for with adjustable blades. So what we just did there is what I'm going to do for every adjustable blade I get. If I get an Andis Master blade, if we get the Wahl adjustable blades, anything that has an adjustment lever that we can sharpen, that blade's not staying in one setting. We are going to use this process here so that that blade is making good contact in its so that blade's making good contact no matter if it's in the short setting or in the long setting. So next we're going to move on to trimmer blades. Alright, now we're going to move on to trimmers. And so with trimmers, the interesting thing about that is they're actually not considered sharpenable. Overall, they're considered a disposable blade. That's from the factories, they would tell you that. But we know, and most barbers and stylists, people who are going to be using trimmers know that they can be sharpened. We just have to do a few different steps there. What we're working with is we don't have a lot of metal, and because of that, we don't have a lot of room for error. We also are going to build up heat a lot more quickly. And so we're going to work with that. How do we use lighter pressure? How do we get these blades sharpened and be able to have a good result, like new result, and make our customers happy being able to sharpen a blade that's not supposed to be sharpened. So the first thing I'm going to talk about here is where do we set our magnets. So the first thing I start with on this blade is I don't use our big red magnet. I just use, this is just a little rare earth magnet. This one specifically came from an old hard drive. We broke the magnet out of it and I broke up a piece that I like. It works for me. It's my favorite one, so don't ask for this one. Every time I go to a show, I hesitate on even bringing it because they end up sticking to the side of something and I never come back with my magnet. I have a little bit of PTSD with that. I've had this one for a long time, and honestly, that's probably the only bright side to the show being canceled, is that I don't have to worry about losing my magnet this month. But other than that, I like to use this little magnet. Same principles apply. We want to have our downward pressure put in a spot. We want our magnet to be in a spot that it puts our downward pressure directly over that front rail. Everything's just a little bit smaller, but it's going to give us more control. And my downward pressure coming through my index finger right here is coming right smack dab over the front rail. Same thing on the cutter. We just have even less metal to work with here, but these rare earth magnets work really well for they have a good amount of strength so they can hold on. Even with like this blade specifically, this is a Wahl detailer blade that we're working on, and it has this groove here in the middle, and so sometimes it gets kind of hard of where you're going to put your magnet. This one works really good holding on to a small amount of metal, so that's what I like about it. Again, same principle, put our magnet in a spot that's centered and putting our pressure over the front rail. My magnet here, my favorite magnet, has this little high spot up here, so it just helps me to make sure that my fingers are right where they need to be. Another trick that we might use a little bit on a trimmer on some of them is I may hold the magnet with my thumb and my middle finger a bit low so that my fingers are actually touching the blade, because sometimes they will want to pivot on us a little bit. But that's really the only difference that we have here. It's just a smaller blade. So now we're going to head on over to the sharpening machine right here, and we're going to talk about the differences on what we sharpen and see what that, or on how we sharpen this and what that looks like. All right, so I'm over here, I'm back to the comb, and I have the magnet placed where I want to place it. The first thing you may notice that's different here is I have the machine running at about 3/4 speed. Because the machine has variable speed, I do that, but for a lot of years no machines had that. Even our Oster factory machine doesn't have a variable speed. You can still sharpen these on that, you just have less forgiveness. So you need to be faster and still without mistake, because it's going to take metal a lot faster and it's going to build up heat a lot faster, which is the two things that we're fighting with trimmers. So in light of that, it's not a bad idea to have this conversation with your customer before you take their blades and say, yep, I can sharpen them. I took a class once online, or I've taken training and that kind of thing, is to let your customer know, hey, technically this is a disposable blade. This is not supposed to be sharpened. I can do it. We do it all the time, but I don't have a lot of metal to work with. So if you're not using good blade care, cleaning and oiling your blades, and you have really deep wear grooves in it, these are very shallow, but you'll get some that are very, very deep, and we're going to spend a lot of time. We have to sharpen all the way through those. So we're at the mercy of what they give us. At the same time too, if we make a mistake, especially when we're not at a lower speed, there's a good chance we don't need to spend time trying to fix it, because there's a good chance it's gone. And so if you have that conversation before you take their blades and sharpen them, you save a lot of respect for yourself, your business, and for the sharpening industry as a whole, because now it's an easy conversation. They were already expecting that there may be a chance that they have to buy a new blade versus getting their blade sharpened. But you saved face with them too, because again, I've talked about this before if you've listened to me at all, but anyone who's had work done by a sharpener has had bad work done, and I'm not exempt from that. Especially in these times, my brain is all over the place and I've made some pretty goofy mistakes. And so if we can be reputable with our customer and honor them, this is their livelihood, this is investments that they have to make into their company, that's going to go a long ways for you as a sharpener. And so not a bad conversation to have up front, and then go wow them with your skills. And so that's what we want to do. But yeah, a couple things just to talk about before we got started. So what I'm going to do here when we sharpen this is I'm going to come down here in the center. I always come down in the center of my plate and pick up on the outside of the plate, generally speaking. But with this blade, we're going to use lighter pressure. What we learned from the adjustable blades, though, is if we use lighter pressure and we're out here on the plate, we're going to create a flat ground. but we don't want to create a flat ground in trimmers. Trimmers need to have hollow ground to them, with the exception of any trimmer that would be adjustable. So there was a cordless detailer out for a while that had an adjustable trimmer blade on it that would have a flatter ground or a more shallow hollow ground in it. But otherwise, I would say, I'm guessing, but I would say 95%, 97, 98% of trimmer blades that we're going to sharpen need to be hollow ground. But because I'm using lighter pressure and I end out here, it's going to be flat. So what you're going to see is I'm going to come down here, and I'm only going to come out to about here using lighter pressure. So when I say lighter pressure, I'm thinking like 3/4 pound to a pound of pressure, as opposed to the 1.5 pounds to 1 3/4 pounds of pressure that we would usually be using. So I'm going to come out to about here, and we're going to pick up. It's probably going to be about a 3 to 4 second process. I could take even longer with this wheel spinning slower. With the wheel spinning faster, I would want to see if I could do that in maybe 2 to 3 seconds, because that's about what time we have for it. Our comb is going to be more forgiving than our cutter. There's more metal here to work with, and so it's going to disperse the heat, and we have more rail to be able to use up. So we're going to go ahead and sharpen this comb. And so I'm going to come down to the plate. All my pressure is coming through my index finger, and then we're going to lift. And so what we see here is that short of time on this speed this wheel was moving was not enough. We still have a little bit of wear of that horizontal blade over here. Haven't reached this side at all, and even some of the tips are splotchy. And any of those that old metal that hasn't been lapped into a new surface that's there runs the risk of catching hair. And so we're going to need to spend probably about as much time as I just did all over again on this blade, which is not uncommon. And we're going to pick up. We're really, really close now. I still want to just go ahead, even though this is beyond the cutting, where the cutting is going to happen, I want to go ahead and give it a new surface that's going to give this blade the best chance of lasting as long as possible for our customer. Now I'm happy with this new surface we have. All the tips of the teeth have been ground. The edges are fine now. So we're going to go on over to the rub plate and rub this just to check our work. I don't rub every blade usually, but in the light of teaching, sometimes that helps us see what we're doing when we can't really see what we're doing real well. When I am rubbing on this, I'm putting my pressure over the front rail just like when we were sharpening, but we're trying to simulate the pressure that the blade would have when the blades are moving back and forth together when they're assembled. So on a trimmer blade, you're probably going to talk something like maybe a pound or two. And on adjustable blade, or when we get to detachable blades, what we're going to end up seeing is something more like 3 pounds, 3 to 4 pounds, something along those lines. So now we're going to look at our pattern. Sometimes if the pattern's not real clear, you can rub it a little more and it'll become more clear for us. If we try to catch this in the light, what we're going to see is, you can see the sides are usually pretty pronounced, and then it goes up, way up on the tips, and it stays on the tips all the way across. And as I cast it in the light, I can see that every tooth is there. It gets a little bit thin in the middle. What that's telling me, if we know how to rub, or know how to read our rub patterns, which is not necessarily this class, but what we can touch on that a little bit, is that the higher it is in the middle there, the heavier our pressure is. And so if our pressure's, that's saying that my pressure may be too heavy for where I was in the plate. If I wanted to bring that rub pattern down a little bit, I would use the same pressure but come out to the outside a little further, or I could lighten up my pressure a little bit and stay right where I was. So that's what that rub pattern's telling us. What I'm looking for is that the tips of the teeth are all in the pattern. That's our most important thing. It's not as important as to what the shape is, whether it's a crescent or whether it's a straight line. Those are things that are fun to talk about and I think is worth talking about, but it's not necessarily the most important thing. The most important thing is that all the tips are there and we don't see anything that there's a different facet going on. That would say that maybe we hit the tips or didn't have a clean pickup or landing, or our pressure was too heavy or too light. Those are the kinds of information that we're trying to get. So that was the comb. We're going to move on to the cutter here real quick. Exactly the same process, just a smaller blade and harder to see that rub pattern. Here we are. So to practice what I just said, I used the same pressure, but I came out a little bit harder, a little bit further. The reason I use the same pressure is because it's hard to change a bad habit. That's the only reason. And so because of that, I came out a little bit further, because correcting my muscle memory is very difficult. And we're going to check our rub pattern. And what we'll see on this rub pattern is it's not nearly as defined as what the comb blade is, and that's pretty common with trimmers. But the tips of every tooth is in the pattern, and we can see that with this lighter shape going on down here, that's telling us that I do have a hollow ground there. So there's going to be set in this blade, and we could be pretty confident that this blade is sharpened correctly. And when we get to assembling it, everything's assembled, it gets on the clipper. If it doesn't cut, there's probably a clipper adjustment issue and not a blade issue. And that's what the value that we have in our rub block that we have here. And so that does our trimmer, finishes up our trimmer. One quick thing that we need to talk about before we move on to our next thing is, with our trimmer and with our adjustable blades, we sharpen through the tips of the teeth. And when we sharpen through the tips of the teeth, what I mean is there's no comb length here. So it's not like we're talking bigger blades. If you're in the barber world, we're talking like a 1.5 or a 2 or 2.5. In the animal world, we'd be talking a 10 and up. So 10 and 7s and 4s and 5s and on up. Each of those, there's comb length there. And so when we sharpen, we're not altering the tips of that blade. But on blades where we're sharpening through the tips of the tooth, which is most of these, what do we call it, exception to the rule blades, most of them we're sharpening through the tips of the teeth. And so we're changing the profile of that tooth. When that tooth comes from the factory, it is a rounded edge. And what happens is we go in and we sharpen off one side of that edge, and now we've created a sharp facet or a corner there. And what happens is when they go to use that on the customer, that can end up being scratchy, and it can even end up leaving an abrasion. And on a blade that's been sharpened several times, you actually take away so much of this metal that we end up creating a sharp tip, a sharp point. And that's something that we need to be making sure that we're rounding off and smoothing and softening those tips. Those are things I think we've talked about a little bit here, and things that we need to make sure we're doing. So in the animal world, the two main blades that we need to watch for that we're doing that on is going to be our 40 blades, so blades that are going to be used in a lot of vet hospitals for surgery. The last thing you need is an animal that's already hurting to get hurt even more. And then also the Arco blades, Arco 5-in-1 or the Bravura 5-in-1 blades. Those blades we sharpen through the tips, and they can get really pointy on the tips. And so making sure that we're always checking that, that's our responsibility as the sharpener. It did not come dangerous from the factory. So just to make sure that you're staying professional in that, make sure you're checking those tips, keep your customers safe. So that wraps up what we're going to talk about for trimmers, and we're going to move on to some other problem blades. Alright, so now what we were going to talk about is the Arco 5-in-1, is what I call it, Bravura 5-in-1, the Wahl 5-in-1 blade. It's probably the #1 asked about blade that I get questions on. We've already made a YouTube video on this, and so feel free to go check that out if you need a refresher, if you can't find this video. But this is something that I hope you find helpful. It doesn't meet everyone's business model, so don't feel like you have to shove this in there, but it's something that you can definitely look at and see if it's something that does work for you. When I talk about the Arco 5-in-1, it's a blade that looks like this. And then it has a big old platform that goes underneath it, and it all works together. And it's kind of a goofy looking blade, and Wahl never intended for this to be as big and as popular as it's become, but a lot of groomers are using this for like a full-on clip. Wahl never intended it to be that way, but they're not going to say no to the revenue that's coming from this. And so it gives us sharpeners a little bit of a challenge, because right on Wahl's website, right next to the blade, it says this is a disposable blade. You cannot sharpen this blade. So we have to do some really goofy things to be able to sharpen this blade. There's a lot of different ways that people sharpen this blade. The big issue that we run into with this blade is the cutter. One way that's really popular, one thing that a lot of people do, is we'll sharpen the comb and then replace the cutter. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But there's an extra cost in that because you have to replace parts. And so what we want to do is talk about how can this be a commodity for you to do a little bit of practicing with the technique that we use. You don't have to use our technique, but when you understand what's going on, maybe you see that our technique works, maybe you have a better idea and you need to send me an email and I need to change my technique. I would absolutely love to hear that. But I'm going to show you what we do here. We do a ton of these blades on a weekly basis, and we have great success rate. So hope you find this helpful. So with the Arco adjustable blade, 5-in-1 blade, it's an adjustable blade. And so if you remember, this class is kind of building on itself. I talked earlier about how the adjustable blade, the designer blade that we did earlier, that blade can be done, or that class, if you will, that chapter can be all by itself. I talked about the trimmer blade. That chapter can be all by itself. When I come to the Arco blade, it takes those two chapters and puts it together. You gotta have, it's kind of like a college class. You have to have 101 and 102 before you can take 103. That's kind of where we're at. So the more practice you can get with those blades, whether you want to incorporate that into your business or not, if you're wanting to do the Wahl 5-in-1 blades, then doing more practice on those is going to also boost your skills when you come to the Wahl 5-in-1 blades. And so we're going to take both of the processes that we talked about earlier on those and put them together here. So the Wahl 5-in-1, it's called 5-in-1 because it has 5 different sizes in one blade. That means it's a real fancy scientific way to say it's adjustable. And so we need to sharpen it like it's an adjustable blade. And so if you remember from earlier, we talked about the comb gets a flat ground on it because the cutter and the comb need to make good contact on any setting that they're in. So picture this being our comb and this being our cutter. If we have 2 hollow grounds, they make good contact, or what's called set, right in that one setting. But if I move it to its long setting, now there's not good contact. There's a space between my hand and my fingers here. If we take into a flat ground on our comb, or a very light, shallow hollow ground on our comb, we're going to have good contact here, good contact here, good contact here, wherever you need to move your blade to get the cut that you're looking for. And so that's the whole why behind all of this. And so going right back to talking about where we set up the magnet, I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, but it's something that I see all the time. If you get set too far back, you're going to be chasing issues. And so we're going to set our magnet centered in the blade, and then where our pressure is coming down right over this front rail. That's where it's going to give us control against that wheel spinning underneath us. With the cutters, there's a couple different things we can do with the cutter. We can take it off of this cam. This is called a cam follower. We can take it off of the cam follower and use a small magnet, just like we did with trimmers. Again, we're using that same skill. Or something we could do is you could hold on to this. As long as, one thing I just want to have you make sure of is there's 2 little hooks back here in the back that are holding that cutter to the cam follower, and those hooks are prone to break off, whether it's in disassembly or something along those lines. If those are broken off, it's probably a good idea to either replace the cam follower or don't use the cam follower to hold it while you're sharpening, because it's going to pull the cutter off and it's going to go flying somewhere. And so, but as long as those hooks are there, I actually prefer to hold on to the handle that's already there. The problem is, if you look at this handle is all the way back here on the back rails, which is right where I just got done saying we don't want to be. And so I'm going to hold on back here with my middle finger and my thumb, and then I'm going to take my index finger and I'm going to lay it up here on the metal of the cutter. And that's going to put my pressure right where I need to be, and making sure that I'm not putting any pressure with these 2 fingers, but all my pressure is coming through that index finger. So now we're going to head on over. I'll get the machine fired up and we're going to get sharpening these blades. All right, so we're back over here. I'm back on the comb and I have the magnet right where I need it. And I'm going to sharpen this exactly like we sharpened the adjustable blade earlier. There's nothing that's going to be different here. So you guys should already be pros at this. You can see this one has a really small amount of wear here. It was sharpened recently. You can see how clean it is, and it has these clean scratch lines. So I probably used this for training last week or something. And so not a great example to see what's required here to sharpen. It may take a full sharpening. I would call that at full speed here on our machine. I would call that maybe 6 passes, 7 passes, something like that would be a full sharpening. So I'm probably going to do 4, and then we're going to come over here, lighten up the pressure, and then we're going to stay here for a few seconds and then have a nice clean lift. And so I'm just going to shut up and let you guys, what I want you to do is listen, let you guys listen to how my pressure changes. Watch how the sparks go from a nice bright spark to going to a lot more dim when I'm out here. Those are some identifiers that we're looking for. The other thing I'm looking for in my spark is that it's going all the way across the blade. If I see my spark is only here and here, or my spark's only in the middle, that tells me I still need to do more sharpening. There's no sense in stopping and looking and seeing our result because we don't have a good result yet. Our spark is going to tell us when we have a result that might be worth looking at. This one's going to come up right away again because all the damage is gone. So here we go. When I lighten up my pressure, it's crucial to make sure that we still are putting that little bit of pressure that we do have left up over this front rail. If we're not doing that, our tendency is to instantly go back and then we get goofy patterns going on. So that should be all we need for the sharpening. We can come over here and rub it. I'm probably at 3 to 5 pounds. Got all 3 fingers kind of up over the front rail. And this is more of what the pattern I was looking for on the adjustable blades is, but it's already coming a little bit further down the blade than what we would naturally do. And this is also telling me that my wheel is still very true. Fun fact on my wheel is I'm at 2,229 blades just on this side. And so that goes to show the importance of our grit coverage, making sure that we're not pushing that thin. We can still get good patterns long into the life of these. We don't advertise that the wheels can go that far because there's a ton of variables that would change that, but it's very much capable of doing that. And if you can understand what your rub block's telling you, that's going to help you understand if your wheel needs to be resurfaced or not. So just for kicks and giggles, we'll rub it one more time to see that I do have that shallow hollow ground, and it should come much further down the blade. And you can see now it's a very, very flat pattern. As I kind of play with that in the light, I'm thinking you're catching it a little bit. All that dark burnishing on the top is coming way down the blade. That's just perfect what we're looking for. I love what that looks like. Now we're going to talk about this cutter, this pesky cutter. So for sharpening, it sharpens just like a trimmer does. So that's what we're going to do here in this process. The problem that we run into with these cutters is that they build up a burr and they don't let go of it. And they need some encouragement, to say the least, to get rid of that burr. We're going to have a few extra steps that we're going to do. Again, you guys have probably seen this on our YouTube. If you haven't, remember that it's there. Go check it out so that you guys can have that memory there, because not everybody sees these on a regular basis. We see them on a regular basis, so I have the unfair advantage of getting a lot of practice on them. And I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek because they're also a pain in the butt, so I don't necessarily always want the extra practice. But because we've gotten decently efficient at it and consistent with our result. Same thing, very, very little wear here, so this isn't going to take much time, but just like a trimmer, we want to spend as little time on the wheel as possible because we want to build up as little burr as possible. And so I'm going to set down here in the middle, making sure that my pressure is coming through this finger up on the metal part of the blade, not back here with these 2 fingers. I'm going to come on out here somewhere in the middle, and then we're going to have a nice clean lift. As you can see, we have a whole fresh lapped surface all the way through the tips of the teeth. And that's what we're looking for. If we're second guessing anything, sometimes if I look at it too long, I start to second guess like, oh, well, is there something going on over here? We can run it one more time. But just know that we're creating more work for ourselves on this blade the more time we spend on the plate. So when you've got that plate that's spinning real fast because you don't have the variable speed machine, my first recommendation is that you give me a call and buy a variable speed machine. I would absolutely love to sell you that. But you very much can use what you have, and I don't want you to feel like you can't use what you have. That's definitely a joke, and it's very serious. I would love to sell you a machine and get you this. I love this machine with the variable speed. It's great for mobile. It has such a low amp draw, and so I like that aspect of it, but it's not a necessity, and within reason, don't let people tell you that this machine or that machine is a necessity and you cannot sharpen without it, because it's simply not true. It comes to the person who's using the machine and the skills that they have, the training that they have. And I mean that for blades, I mean that for scissors. It's 100% true. There are people that can put out good work on machines that I would never recommend for someone to buy, but that's what happens. So anyways, that was a rabbit trail that I got on. I should probably have notes for this next time. So now what I have, I'm feeling over the top of this, and I want to recommend that you do this for every 5-in-1 blade that you get, because what that does is it's just going to start giving you familiarity on what that burr feels like, and you'll be able to feel what a big burr versus a small burr feels like. We're not together in person, otherwise I'd give you some examples of this is a very small burr. I had the advantage of knowing that this blade didn't have very much wear, so it wasn't going to require much sharpening, and so we were going to have a small burr. If you have a customer that doesn't use oil at all, or doesn't clean their blades at all, you're going to end up out of necessity having to have a big burr. And so if we meet in class, or you come out for training with us, or come to another training event, I would absolutely love to help show you that. That's the hard part with this virtual training, but that's what we're working with there. So every blade you get a chance to sharpen, just practice kind of feeling what that burr feels like. So the next thing I'm going to do is we need to get rid of that burr. So I've just got here a hand wire brush. A nylon brush isn't going to be strong enough, and so I use a hand wire brush, or even here in our shop we'll go as far as using like a brass or steel wheel on a bench grinder to brush this burr. What we're trying to do is we're going to be flipping that burr to create metal fatigue. I'm going to brush that burr down. So what that looks like is I'm pinching this blade real hard here, and I'm brushing the burr down. And so now if I were to run my hand across this, it should be very smooth. I don't feel any scratchiness, nothing biting at my fingers. The opposite is also true. If I run my hand across this blade, now I can feel that burr has moved down and it's catching on my fingers. So we're going to come back over to our plate now, and we're going to begin the process of bending that burr back and forth and breaking that burr off. So what I'm going to do is what we call kissing the plate. I'm going to come to where I pick up my blade off of the plate, and I'm going to come down, and we're just going to kiss the blade onto the plate and lift up. This is where these get to be a real pain in the butt, and why practice is key, because every time we come down to the plate and come off of the plate, we run the risk of damaging the tips. Whether we crash the tips into the plate, or don't come off real smooth, or we change our pressure, all of those things are going to create this different hollow ground or damage and all of those kinds of things. And so this gets to be a little bit of a pain as you're learning and getting on and off the plate. But we're using really light pressure, and so it shouldn't be anything too scary. I'm not looking to jam it on the plate real quick and get off. I'm literally just coming in and just a real quick kiss to the plate and then right off is what we're looking for. And so this is about where I came off the plate. I'm going to come down, and that's all we're doing. That's it. And now I'm feeling for that burr, and I can't feel any burr on this bottom side anymore. Come back over here, and I can feel that a lot of that burr has pushed up. It feels thinner than it did before. So now I'm going to come back to my brush. We're going to brush that back down. We're just flipping it back and forth until it breaks off and gives us a more refined edge. Feeling it again. Don't feel it over here. I'm feeling it over here. Now we're going to come back over to the plate. I'm a little more heavy-handed, so that creates more work for me. I have to do this process 2 to 3 times usually. On a really bad blade, I might have to do it 4 or 5 times. But usually 2 to 3 times is all that's required for me and my touch. So this will be my last time. The burr is very thin now. I probably don't even need to this time, but there's nothing I hate more than rework. Having to get my blade all assembled and it doesn't cut, and I have to come back here, try to figure it out. We're only making $7 on a blade. I don't have time to come rework. Once I have to do rework, I'm not making any money. And so rework is no fun. So we'll just do it one more time. It's kind of the measure twice, cut once theory going on here. So this is the last time. I'm going to brush it down, and then we're going to go over to our rub block just to make sure after all that on and off the plate that we were doing, where in the world did my rub pattern end at? Do I have a blade that's even gonna cut? So I'm gonna come over here. This one I do rub just a little bit different because technically this can count as bending that burr back and forth one more time. And so what I did was, that was the last time we needed to be on the plate. I brushed the burr down. Now I'm coming over to the block. And what I'm gonna do here on the block is I'm gonna pull it backwards and then go ahead and rub it on the block. One more thing on the block is there's not really a way that you have to rub it. You can go side to side, up and down, figure eights, doesn't really matter. All of it's gonna give us a decent result. Alrighty. So when we come back over here and look at it, we're gonna see it looks very, very similar to all of our trimmer blades, where it's kind of muddy, but we can see that it does have a general trajectory of that rub pattern that we were looking for, and we have a very, very clean edge now. And so now this blade's done, we're ready to get it back and get sharpened. So it's a little bit more work, and what I'm talking about where it may or may not be good for be a good fit for your business is we have these extra steps that are going into it. If you don't see a lot of them on a regular basis, it does take some muscle memory and some practice. So if you're not getting a lot of them and you're not getting that practice in, it may be better to just go ahead and replace the cutters. Or it's something, talking about that rework, it's just I'm not getting it. It is what it is. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to fuss with it. Then yeah, I mean, a quick hollow ground sharpening and or the flat ground sharpening, and then slap a new cutter on there. It's very stress-free and easy. But if this is a skill that you think you want to give a shot, go for it. I hope this is a helpful tool for your business and something that helps you exceed and gives you maybe a leg up on your competition, and also enable a way to be able to help your customers more quickly. All right, we're going to talk about a video or a blade that I get asked about a lot. It's going to be kind of talk about a few different blades in this category, but we're going to call it wide blades or blocking blades or super blocking. There's quite a few blades, T blades, they all kind of fit into this category. And the steps that I use to sharpen them are all the same. With all sharpening, there's different ways of people doing different things. But this is how I do it, have a lot of good success with it. It might be something that'll be helpful for you. So here I've got a blocking blade, and like all the other videos and all the other blades, I am going to place my magnet centered in the blade and directly over the front rail. With this, because it's a wider blade, I am going to actually go back to horizontal with my magnet. That way I'm covering more area to be able to get a little bit more precision there. I don't like going to the big magnet on these blades. Just doesn't feel right to me. I think I can do a better product with the smaller magnet still. But that's what it's going to look like. Same thing for the cutter. We're going to center it up here. Close enough. Up over the front rails. And we're ready to do our pressure where it needs to be. So the different step I do here is really just the opposite of what we've already been talking about. Everywhere else we've been talking about lighter pressure, lighter pressure, lighter pressure. And here what I'm going to do is we're going to sharpen this normally like every other detachable blade, 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds, or yeah, 1.5 pounds to 1.75 pounds of pressure. We need to do enough passes to grind in a new surface. But this one, instead of lightening our pressure at the end, I'm going to actually increase my pressure up to about 2 pounds, maybe 2.25 pounds of pressure. What we're doing is we're taking that hollow ground that we have, we're going back to our blade picture, and I'm making it steeper. I'm trying to push the limits so that when my rub pattern should be way, way, way up on the tips, the very tips. The reason for that is with these wide blades, you have this wide blade here, and our tension spring is sitting right here in the middle. And so out here on the edges, we have no tension sitting over them. And the way blades are designed, they just don't have a lot of cutting power when you get out beyond that tension. And so if we create more set in the blade, then it's going to make up for that lack of tension that's out there, just to give you a little bit crisper cut. And you may find that's going to help you with sharpening these blades. So we'll get the machine fired up here, and we'll walk through sharpening one of these blades. All right, so we're back to the comb blade here. Got my magnet set back up, and everything's going to be the exact same. It's just going to be like normal everyday sharpening, which isn't what this class is about. But when I get done, I'm going to come out here to the outside just like I did with the adjustable blades. But now this time, instead of me lightening up and seeing a duller pattern and a quieter grind, what we're going to see is a brighter spark pattern and a louder grind because I'm increasing my pressure, and then we're going to come off the plate. We want to go from heavy pressure to no pressure, so that way that deeper pattern translates straight to my blade. So here's what that looks like real time. And that's all it takes. So we're going to move on over and check my work. This is a little bit intense because the rub block doesn't lie to us, and so I'm getting a live quiz right in front of you guys as if I were training in front of you. No editing going on right there. So if we look at this pattern, you can see that only the very, very tips are burnished on this comb. And with the way these blades are set, it's going to be set all the way up at those tips. So we don't have to worry if the blade had a setback to it where it was going to be set further down the blade, then we would have issues with the contact between the comb and the cutter. But because this blade is set all the way up at the tips, we can really push that limit and get that burnish pattern all the way up to the tips. Same exact process for the comb, or for the cutter. Makes sense there. Check my work. Same results. That's all we're trying to do here. Nothing complex about those, but you may find that helps you. I know some people it doesn't help, that's all right. And even within our own shop, Jason doesn't end up doing that as much as I do. I really rely on that. If I don't do that, my blades, I end up getting some rework in there. I don't have as good of results. Versus if I do that, I almost never have to come backwards and do rework. So I hope that's another helpful tool that you can get as you get into some of these trickier blades that don't quite meet the status as all the other blades that we end up seeing. Hey guys, so we are going to finish up this series talking about Wahl blades, just general Wahl detachable blades. It's something I get quite a few questions on. Someone usually tells me they're having a problem. I've got this one blade, all their blades are sharpened up nice, but I got this one blade that's giving me problems. One of the first questions you'll hear me ask on the phone is what brand is the blade? Because what we have run into is that sometimes we run into some issues with Wahl blades in general, just not sharpening up quite as well as other blades. What we have found here in our experiences is that they don't hold up to the heat quite as well, and they start to get some warping rather than transferring that hollow ground pattern or that tapered pattern from our plate into the blade. And so I'm just going to show you a couple techniques that we use here that can help you to keep the heat down, so that way you have a good transfer of your hollow ground to your plate, or from your hollow ground of your plate into the blade, and then hopefully have success with these Wahl blades and get beyond the struggle that you're running into. One quick thing to talk about with some of the Wahl blades is once you get into like the 7s and higher for animal blades, they have that kind of spine back to them. I don't have one here, but you may require, like a lot of times if I'm using this magnet, because you're holding on to less metal, it doesn't stay up where you need it. And so sometimes that's the issue also, is that the magnet was sliding and we didn't even notice it. And so typically what I'll do is I'll take my trimmer magnet and stick it right back behind this magnet when I put it on the blade. So it would look like this kind of a thing. I'd have my red magnet set where I want, and then I'm going to set my trimmer magnet up behind it as a stop to hold it where it's at, just because there's not as much metal for that to hold on to, and they can slide so smooth and gently that you don't even notice it. And so that's one issue. We're going to talk more about the heat and the warping issue. So we'll get the machine fired up here and show you some techniques to get around that. All right, we've got our magnet set up right in the center of the blade, up over the front rail for our pressure. So we have a couple different things we can do to keep heat from building up. One of those things that we can do is just in general spend less time on the plate. This isn't rocket science, but obviously, but But these are the conversations that I have on a daily basis, trying to help people with these problem blades, since I can't be right there with you, and we don't necessarily cover every single thing that you may see, whether it's a one-on-one training with us at our facility here in Ankeny, or even in the classes like the one you're in right now. We don't always get to every single detail, and might forget some things and that kind of stuff. So yeah, so it's a phone call I get. So we want to keep down on the heat. One of the things we can do is sharpen in little bursts, if you will. So we'll come down to the plate and we just sharpen for 1 or 2 passes and get off the plate. Give the blade a few seconds to cool, and then sharpen again in another quick little burst. So that would kind of look like this. If we needed to sharpen more, we would come back. Our blade's pretty well cooled off. And if we needed a little bit more, we could do that. My issue that I have with that is the more times on and off the plate, the more times we run into the risk of damaging the tips when we're coming down or picking up, or not having our pressure right, or not having our magnet right. We just run into all these things. If we can sharpen it once, we don't run into all these things. So another way that you could do that would be, we would come in and sharpen this just like normal. I have quite a bit of heat built up here, so I might have had some warping issues. Then what I would do is I would move on over to the cutter, and we're going to sharpen it like normal. Then we would come back for just one quick pass on this, just to grind out anywhere where the blade might have warped a little bit. So we're going to come in and lift up. That would be enough to regrind that hollow on a cool blade without building up any heat. Another way we can make sure that we're not building up heat is making sure that our blade, or that our pressure downward on the blade is in that 1.5 to 1.75 pounds. So then I would come back to the cutter. It's kind of a double grind, if you will, on that blade. The last thing you can do, and this is what I end up doing in my daily practice, is just trying to, in general, just spend less time on the plate. So at the rate that I go back and forth here, I usually do, if I'm thinking anyways, I'm doing about 4 passes on the cutter, 5 passes on the comb. And that usually gives me the new surface that I'm looking for on most blades. So standard wear, standard detachable blades. So I may try to do a little bit less here, maybe 3 passes on the cutter and 4 passes on the comb. Just in general, spending less time on the plate will build up less heat. So. Very short amount of time on the plate. That's all this blade really probably needed for sharpening. Obviously, we're at the mercy of the customer. How was their blade care? In some cases, it's not real good. And so in that sense, we have to take more grinding out. And in that case, it's going to build up a lot more heat. So just being conscious of the heat that is building up on those and how that can affect that hollow ground. That's really what the issue comes down to with a lot of the Wahl brands specifically. It used to kind of be that way with Buttercut. I don't run into that too often. Master grooming tools are that way. Those are the ones that come to mind right off. And so, yeah, that's just something to watch for, and that's something that you may find helpful when you run into those blades. Give that a try, and maybe save you a phone call from talking to me about something that you're bummed out about, and we can talk about fishing, or we can, whatever, how good business is, or something more fun than your frustration over a blade. Something I want to really encourage you to do is call me before you get to the end of your rope. You're only making $6 or $7 or $8, $9, whatever, per blade. Don't spend all day on it. Get to the end of your rope and you call me just frustrated and discouraged. Call me right away. Let's talk about it. You're not going to bug me. I may or may not be available right that second, but I try to be. And we can talk about what's going on and see if we can get you success right there, and we can get this blade back into your customer's hand, help them be more successful right away. help you be more successful right away. That also means you're going to get paid faster, which everybody, you know, that's a nice feature to that as well. So I really appreciate you guys tuning into this. Just honored that you're taking the time to listen to me ramble on about these things. Hope these are helpful. These are common questions. Don't feel alone if you're having problems with these blades. It was very easy for me to build an outline on what is tricky blades, because it's these. I get asked about them on a weekly basis. One of the 5, if not all 5. So I hope that this has been helpful. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's keep in touch, whether that's over email or phone. Check out our Facebook, check out our YouTube. There's more content like this there, and we'd love to get your feedback on what other things. What did I miss? I'm sure I missed something. Let me know, and we'll see what we can do. Thanks again, guys. It's been fun.